Friends, welcome this evening to Kaul Memorial Lecture. The Raza Foundation instituted 7 memorial lectures in the name of V.S. Gaitonde, Kaul, Kelucharan Mahapat, Kumar Shahni, Habib Tanveer, Daya Krishna, and a gay, besides Kaul, of course. And this is the second. The first one, V.S. Gaitonde Memorial Lecture, delivered by Dr. Kolte, and now is the second one. And the next month, Dr. Mukund gives the Kumar Gandhar Memorial Lecture on the 10th of January. So those of you who have a diary may kindly note it. The invitations will follow. These lectures are not supposed to be about the people after whom they have been named, although they may be about them as well, because they are, after all, major figures. In case of Kaul, there are many here who knew him personally, and I have had the good luck of knowing him for a long time, and also having been producer of one of his films. When I watched him, I didn't know anything about filmmaking. In fact, I had no experience in films at all, until I got a phone call from Kaul one day from Delhi, saying that he wanted to make a film on Mukti Bodh, and since I was supposed to be a kind of a minor authority on Mukti Bodh at that time, so maybe you are interested. I had no clue and no idea. I said, well, I'll be interested. Why don't you come here? So he came. And when he came, I got him from the airport, and we happened to be talking about Mukti Bodh for about 2.5 hours without a break. And I realized that he knew Mukti Bodh in a manner in which I had never imagined anybody could possibly discover Mukti Bodh. So finally, the film Sata Se Utta Aadmi made at a shoestring budget of 3.5 lakhs or something like that. And at that time, I watched him. I didn't watch him through. I watched him once in a while when he was shooting. That anything that came by accident or unpremeditated was also allowed to come in. This is more like what once Kumar Gandhar said, that he was supposed to have used a Varjit Swar in a rag. And when he was asked, how did he use it? He said, I went once and I found him at the door. So I told him that this is not your business, go away. Second time I came, he was still there, so I ignored him. The third time I came, he was still there at the door. So I said, after all, this is the darbar of this rag, and there is somebody at the door, why not allow him in? I suppose something of that kind might have been happening to Kaul's mind. And of course, you know that Mani was a very serious Dhrupad musician. He knew Dhrupad inside out. It's because of him that we created Dhrupad came in Bhopal. Bhopal had no tradition of Dhrupad. It was because Kaul showed such deep interest and knowledge about Dhrupad that we decided to create a Kendra. And now we are very proud that the very first batch had the Uday Bhavalkar and Gundecha brothers, the 3 musicians who now occupy the Dhrupad scene in a very prominent way. Kumar Shahni was another accident, in the sense that, of course, everybody knew Kumar Shahni's reputation and all, until I ran into him on the stairs of Jahangir Art Gallery. I don't know what had, and we met by accident, and I was again struck by his knowledge of the Hindustani classical music, and he said he wanted to make a film, and we decided why not. So that's how Khayal Gatha. So all these were random. As you can see, there is a randomness into these decisions and randomness into what ultimately became very important works of art. So by choosing Kumar Shahni, We have also chosen a person who has made a lot of difference to the world of cinema, whose approach to cinema has been so unique and so thoughtful and so thought-provoking. And Mani and Kumar Shahni, they are great friends. And like all great friends, they have great quarrels. And a couple of them I have been witness to, but without taking sides. So here you are, Kumar Shahni, delivering the inaugural Mani Kaul Memorial Lecture. Kumar Shahni.
Yeah, for inviting me to give the first inaugural Mani Kaul lecture. I've had a very curious experience.
No, this is working, but you have to switch.
I've had a very curious experience of giving a memorial talk earlier of somebody, for somebody who was very much younger than me. And that was an assistant of mine, a student and an assistant of mine called Nandini Sanyal. I had given this talk in Calcutta. And he had set up, her family had set up a memorial thing for her. And in fact, she had not even lived to actually see the realization of Charadhyaya, for which she had started working with me. And whenever one loses a colleague as close as Mani was, as Ashok rightly pointed out, that we were friends enough to quarrel and argue and compete and everything. And in a world where there are so few resources for the kind of filmmaking that, let us say, we indulged in, and I hope to continue to indulge in, it is with a very strange feeling. Mani was also considerably younger than I. He was 3 or 4 years younger than I. So I do feel a little odd to be giving this talk, but nevertheless, since the right person has set up this institution, I'm happy to do so. And these last few weeks have been very stressful for me. I would have liked to put it together in a more organized form, but these last few weeks have been very, very stressful, so please forgive me if I grope around a bit to get to that particular randomness which I desire, and which I think, in a sense, in his own way, Mani was sort of beginning to desire at the end of his life. And over that also we had several arguments. And he had announced to me once, reminding me that I had told him when I was shooting Maya Darpan, and when I was taking the shots of the dance sequence at the end, that I had not looked through the camera at that point when I was taking those shots. And those shots were, of course, planned through a very, very difficult process, through many, many discussions with Bansi Chandragupta, the art director, who had also worked with Satyajit Ray, who was the senior most member of the team of Padmapanchali, and of course he was very, very much more senior to us when we were making Maya Darpan. and K.K. Mahajan, me and Chandralekha, who's also no more with us. So Mani asked me if I remember that, and he said, I desire now to make films without looking through the camera. And he tried. The cameraman wouldn't accept that situation. And then I told Mani that it doesn't matter, don't make a fetish out of it, Just go ahead and somehow, move away from the idea of structure. And that's enough, you don't have to physically not look through the camera. Physically you may make even the gesture of, looking through the camera, etc. His frustration was that the cameraman didn't do the same. So after that, I don't know what happened. We didn't meet very often. He had gone up to out of India, lived there, and we just nominally picked up our conversation. And perhaps the last time that I met him at Gurgaon, at Raman's place, he was discussing with me the order imposed on his body by the medicine that was being given to him. And I did again see what the problem was, because just a few weeks before that last meeting, I met one of Rimli's friends who's teaching at Stanford University. She was teaching biology there, and she said a very important thing, and she's brilliant. It's, Jackie is her name, Devaki Bhaya. She had said to me that now they're looking upon viruses and medicines to fight them through the codes that they know. So what she described to me seemed to be like a battle within the body, but of a different order. The antibiotics used to do the same, the earlier antibiotics. But now the body itself is being understood through a different methodology, by the instruments of measurement which are different from the earlier instruments of measurement. And these encoded signals then attack the other invasive codes of the virus. The virus is not a material thing anyway. So so medicines which are now being generated will also be signals. They need not be they may be catalysts of material forms, but they will not actually be conceived materially. I think this is a very important thing. And you all know that we have had to face very great challenges in the last 30 or 40 years or more. I think more, because I heard from other people that I know very well, like my brother Kumar Shahni, that the defense establishments of the world already had a lot of the technology which is now coming into imaging in every way. So the cinematographic tradition itself, and therefore any sort of thought generated by imaging, I mean both sound images and picture images, are changing in a very basic fashion. And they're also being used to generate diagrams for architecture, medicine, in all these kind of fields. And of course, above all, they govern the world through the interpretations that they offer of the market. You know, the market is now in complete control of the world rather than the state. You know, so these are important considerations. And when we begin to believe, like we believed in causation, because that apple fell down, you know, on somebody's head, we started believing in a number of things that the legendary Newton gave us. Now, so many things have not only changed at the turn of the 19th century to the 20th century, but many things are in continuous change now, which challenge our imagination and our comprehension of reality. And the talk today, therefore, will mainly speak about the challenges that we face in this and how it is so difficult at the moment to be able to start questioning the methodology that one has to apply all the time to continuous change in technology and discontinuous change in society, which is, you know, and our modes of meeting the very fundamental sensuous world and the apparatus with which we meet it, our own bodies. So it seems to me that the most intense experiences absorb all our senses, including the mind, through simultaneous synapses taking place within the nervous system. They free us from habitual perception and take us to a different cognitive plane. I think that the notations designed at the origins of civilization are speaking of composite meaning, like hieroglyphs and like the marks that you have seen on the seals of in the Indus Valley civilization, like the oracle bones, which then become the characters in China, like the alphabet, which grows out of just simple strokes, and very often the two stand for both for letters and for numbers. So already you'll begin to see that there is a kind of possibility of developing codes whereby you take numbers. In our case now, the digital number is 0 and 1, and 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, etc. So now those are then transformed into images again. So the meaning is both a form of revelation, which was being rejected, you know, for all these years, and of system emergence. You know, that it suggests a new system each time, actually. Sometimes step by step, sometimes as a continuous spring of life-giving water. One of the ways of, I was just telling Mani's pupil about this form of, you know, Zamzam, which has come from the Arabic tradition. actually not only the Arabic but the entire Judeo-Christian biblical tradition to our shores. That the Zamzam is a way of taking a tan, which only very few people ever succeeded in, and one of them is the legendary Rahmat Khan. So life-giving was spotted from the earth, and sometimes you work instead of absolute continuity or this discontinuity in just a glimpse. This is another tradition that is very, very much present in our daily life as well. Like in the Vaishnava tradition, you have the jhanki of just a glimpse of Krishna. So now the photograph, which appeared only a couple of 100 years ago, any photograph, not just the photograph, any photograph, especially one taken outdoors, has that quality of an accident which may transform your vision, your life, trigger new scales of grace, almost as if when you meet it with an accident, Oliver Sacks and all these people have worked on this, that when you meet with an accident, a new grace scale comes into being immediately. Or you might shift your capacity to equilibria in music, which you never had before. They have actually seen many pathological conditions, these people who work on the nervous system, that they find that due to a certain trauma, that you begin to become almost a musical genius at times, So these sort of things, these accidents and traumas are generative again of great creativity. So similarly, while new scales of gray and new sounds emerge, there's also the moment that makes you touch your breath at your own natural note. Both Dhrupat and Kayal, and I'm sure Carnatic music, about which I know very little, but it's very close to these forms. This natural note, natural to you, it is not a fixed thing in nature out there. It is not proposed as that. It's natural to you. It is your sound that is important. So it makes you touch your breath at your own natural note, upon which you may construct a spiral of golden sections. It moves in that kind of way, whereby certain proportions create a spiral. This, of course, has now become very common knowledge, but it has been particularly used by, like, say, people like Tatlin in his imagination of a tower which never got made. I once read an English translation of Shilapatikaram by a Dikshitar. I think, because there are many translations of Shilapatikaram, so it should not be mistaken for any other. So I think it had also an epilogue on our musical systems. I read all of it on a train journey from Bombay to Chennai. Since then, there was something very intriguing in the book, even in the translations. Since then, I wondered if the whole work has secrets within it. This, of course, people say it has. I don't know of any demonstration of how it has. But I've interacted with several dancers and musicians, and they are not able to say it, but they say, yes, there is. There is a secret. There are many secrets. Secrets within it that can unravel the mysteries of our Sangeet, which is both music and again composite. Sangeet is not just swara, it's not melody, it's not tal, it's not a beat, or it's not the laikari alone. It is not the body alone, and it is within the body. There are several, as you know, limbs and which move around different axes, and when these different axes come together with the melodic axes and literary axes, meter, etc., they come together, depart, etc., etc. The contrapuntal effects of all this together begin to make musical sense. And already that is composite, and then when you add that an epic poem, an epic like Shilavadikaram is constructed in its all the characteristics of language brought about and of storytelling, it begins to say see something which has by itself no single notation which meets with a vocabulary like transliteration. So it has to be read, obviously, in a different way. Recently, Mukund Lat at the recent conference read out also something from which examines how the musical system had grown through the syllabic residue almost of the Samavedic chants. Only the syllabic residue. So he has said that it's a very important paper. I thought I had it with me, but in fact I requested him to send something condensed by email, but I don't have it here. Otherwise, a little bit I would have read out from it. So with the Samavedic chants, which sort of originate with the chanting the akshara, the words, like all chants do, there are words which you enunciate with swara. But it becomes music only when it goes beyond 3 or 4 notes. It has to go to the 5th. Then we begin to call in each culture that enunciation music as against the syllabic word. Now it's up to, and in dance similarly, you have certain gestures which may have a lot of meaning, like one-to-one, or they might have meaning which is one-to-one to a word rather than to the meaning of the word. So because the word itself then may have multiple meanings. So when these come together and they are themselves constructed by certain gestures which are independent of meaning, but not meaningless, because they can, when they come together, they do join up as meaning. This is something also like what at the beginning of cinema Eisenstein had emphasized, and both for money and me, through the agency of Ritik Ghatak, who was our teacher, we were at film school together. Eisenstein was our grandpa. You know, he was our biggest ancestor. You know, and so while we may have not ever tried to imitate him, it was impossible to do so. This sort of thinking is fundamental, that, you know, something which is formed and, you know, in its very elementary, in its elementary essence, if you want to call it, or something better than that, if you can find the right word, which, when it comes together with another thing, it begins to generate a multiplicity of meanings, not just one, you know. So, but it is divided into these three type of things. Now, but for getting to those kind of meanings, we cannot address the work which is presented to us only through mathematics, or only through the mechanical, or only through a logical explanation. So the consciousness, in fact, has to expand itself rather than contract before we can understand this kind of work. Or let us say we can give up the older ideas of understanding each time. That is also possible, that we give it up and try to move towards the content as an initiate would within a certain circle, whatever it may be. Even people like Noam Chomsky, when they are talking about the necessity of a code, you know, they're trying to say that scientifically we might approach something in such a way that code itself can show its breaking point. You know, I like to quote one thing very often from Chomsky, his 2 lectures on freedom and on knowledge, and he says, for instance, like he read a sentence that in which somebody said that the universe, one of it, about the universe, that one of it is enough. Now there is no such possible expression in any language. You can't say one of it, you know. But anyhow, he felt that this was the correct way of enunciating what that person wanted to say. Now this cinematograph, I am here deliberately using the term preferred by Robert Bresson. Incidentally, there was a news item or something about today's talk in which they said that Robert Bresson, that Mani had worked with Robert Bresson.
He did not.
He had not worked with Robert Bresson. He admired him greatly, and he was greatly influenced by Robert Bresson. He was probably even more influenced by Robert Bresson than I was. I had worked with Bresson, and I think what appealed to Mani a lot in Robert Bresson's work was the structural possibilities that he threw up in a rhythm line. This was before he studied Drupal, that it was in a rhythm line which is rather like Drupal, you know, that it goes like in Drupal, there is a syllabic coming together with a note which goes in a very, very set progression when you begin to learn it, at least. I don't know what happens later, because in performance, sometimes people say that they are playing Drupal, but they are not, you know. But, you know, it's sensibly still called Drupal. And many great musicians included the great Ravi Shankar himself, who's also passed away a couple of days ago. So anyway, that was the aspect, which is a very highly structured aspect. And I'm mentioning this especially since later on he wanted to move away from the structure to what was eluding us all with the new technology especially, which is pre-coded, you know. So anyway, the qualities of the photograph are extended in a sense by Bresson. Here I will just mention briefly what everybody knows already. How they were extended is that Bresson took 40 takes very often of very simple action, 40 takes of a shot. You know, the first time I met Bresson, I got to his place and I was playing while writing and then stopping to write. I was playing with something, probably the pen, and I did this, something of this sort. And this came as a sudden sign. So Bresson said to me, I cannot ever get this from an actor who has faced the camera. It has to come from a person who has not faced the camera, who has not also acted in theatre. And I said, what is it that it wasn't anything special. Everybody does it. So while we were talking about other things, suddenly when I did this, he felt that this was a sign of my inner being, which was not psychological but spiritual, which had no psychological dimension. This is very important to remember. And so I was just beginning to understand what he was doing at that time. And when I saw the when I was assisting at the actual shooting, very often this kind of gesture was not even shot, because he was Bresson took a lot of close shots. That's another thing that Mani and he are very close. I don't take so many close shots, for example. I don't structure it on a rhythm line as well. You know, I take very much shots with tremendous amount of movement and all the changes in screen size take place within that. So now this connects up, this thing that, you know, when this gesture, for instance, is not in the close shot is like being cut off here at my shoulders or something. Yet there is a tension which is visible in the tilt of my head or the eyes or the way the nostrils flare or just that little bit of an archaic smile or something of that kind, which then registers in a different way from all the acted and motivated signs that are available. And Bresson takes these 30, 40, 50 takes after 30, 40, 50 rehearsals, or used to take, I mean, he's no more either. So so as to be able to reach that sign. Of course, none of us can afford that kind of shooting. You can imagine, we shot with 30, 40 takes, for simple shots like saying, so, how are you feeling? And all that there is in this shot is not well. And you say, not well, not well, not well, not well, till, you go through a stage where instead of doing this, you might throw it like that, and finally you enter a situation where your psychological motivation is also gone. So there's no breakdown. You've come to a different poise, if you like, where the revelation takes place. Now, also, since we are speaking about Bresson at this moment, I do, if anyone of you is actually interested in extending the question of randomness to European cinema, there's a wonderful interview of Robert Bresson by Jean-Luc Godard, where you come into a relationship that exists between different Christian traditions, which are secularized, of course. In this case, Godard is questioning Bresson about his work with the actors and about the title, Au hasard, Balthasar. Now, everybody is making fun of that title because it rhymes, Au hasard, Balthasar. And Bresson said, I like that. I like the rhyme, and somehow it balances off with the accidentality of everything, this kind of thing. So, for those of you who have seen this film, you would know that the donkey is named Balthasar after the donkey that Christ himself had ridden, according to the legend. And the donkey is baptized. That means he's a Christian, just like the characters in the human characters there. And the human characters there are embodying the different sins, the 7 deadly sins, like lust and avarice and jealousy, so on, envy. And so this was more or less in the second half of the 20th century, and at the end of the second millennium, after the birth of Christ, I think in the 80s he made a film called L'Argent. So it was the end of the millennium, and it also coincided more or less with the end of the age of capital as we understood. L'argent means money. So, the age of capital, as it were, as we understood it then, industrial capital. It is now very much, even a poor country like ours, like India, is very much transformed and brought into the age of finance capital. So it's a very different form of existence, along with the different kind of technologies that have come up, with which we do almost everything from sharing intimate moments on Facebook to, or over Skype or something, and to very great predictions of the weather and how we might interact with the world. So L'Argent was based on a novella by Tolstoy. So, and all this is important because of the kind of problem we have with predictability now. If you read any text by Tolstoy, he's virtually saying that we can hardly know how history is made and constructed, how history constructs itself. Bressot could not make any film after L'Argent because of the reluctance of insurance companies to back his films. And I'm facing a very similar situation right now at this very moment, because the kind of laws that are being put into place and practices and regulations will make it almost impossible for an individual to make independent films. Will be possibly forced into making all films of some length, let us say, and expense, only with corporate backing. The way regulations are coming to being now. That again is a terrible paradox, because actually it should be much easier for an individual now to make films, given the nature of the technology that we have. In some ways it is a great improvement on all the technologies we used before. For instance, a simple thing like desaturation, can now be done with a couple of hours of work, maybe a shift at a high-end digital studio. Whereas to get desaturation earlier, because we were dealing with materials, actual materials, and not signals, that we had to import very special equipment or apply, say, lighting with a totally off color temperature and so on to desaturate what the emulsion would have done. These are things that we have done. I've done along with KK, and so KK Mahajan was the cameraman who worked with both Mani and me and Mrinal Sen. And now, if only people were to recognize the potentials that the new media are offering, and to spend enough time, we could go forward into territories which we have not really so far dared to step in. And this would affect not only the technical things like what I just spoke of, but actually the manner of acting. For instance, there is this tremendous move away from actual acting to a completely animation-driven acting, where the voice may be the only non-virtual thing. Sometimes that plays a lot of magic So when you have a different kind of approach to it, you might find that through the acting, naturally our own conception of ourselves, because most identification takes place through performance, our perceptions of ourselves will change very, very greatly if the new technologies are given the respect that they deserve and the time that they deserve in the high-end studios and at shooting, etc. Nowadays, most people are shooting, and whatever happens, people say, even Hema Malini has complained about this, that people tell her, Koini will take care of it in the post-production process. It means, you may have missed your tal and your beat and your everything. You just fiddle around and there you are. So, things have gone in the opposite direction of what should be happening. So naturally, in forensic evidence, no such picture is acceptable because you can doctor it. And this doctoring has been going on since the 1970s. So as you know, the defense departments had already started working on these things much before they were commercialized, these things. And it was one of the heads of the Reuters desk who had first told me that this is what was happening. So the news that you have been receiving since the 1980s as true has all more or less been falsified for a long, long time, at least 30 years. So that thing is getting more and more impossible, and therefore the confusion that it creates can create those fascistic orders and an idea of both femininity and masculinity, which are just incredibly horrible. That's the only thing I can say about it, given what has happened in our country, and to which we have drawn attention over and over and over again. The last couple of days, it has again happened in the most horrific way, but it is also happening in Italy, because I believe that Mr. Berlusconi has for the 10th time the desire to become the Prime Minister of this country after ruining that country so many times over and boasting about it. And that kind of fascism, which is internalized to such a degree, is now in place every day. So I beg of you that we must read these changes of technology in other terms, on other terms as well, so that we see that these technologies are not only speaking about the form of the past or anything of that kind, that our concerns are not just such as to be called elitist because we are trying to keep up with this, or some self-indulgence. We have all often been accused of that, and that we are not caring for the people and for what is happening. That is not at all the case. It is exactly the opposite. These technologies, in the way that they are being at present being used, are creating an erasure not only of memory, history, etc., but also of our basic humanity. I hope that if this thing is met with, that these very same technologies will actually help us to create a mutation of sorts in our mental framework. You know, I want to say, on a positive note, that the point is that this universe is our universe. You know, it's like the Constitution of India, which has this very unique quality compared to its predecessors, that in it we gave ourselves the freedom, you know, and we want to continue to give ourselves the freedom. The point is that the universe is our universe. That every human being or every plant, every living thing is created by us. We have created it because we know it, and knowledge is a way of creation. You know, it is not just out there in a fixed pattern. We have to know it again and again, which means we have to create it again and again. Thus, each one of us, you, she, he, they, I. Now, I emphasize that all these people, as subject, object, or agency, can now operate through these new technologies and go past the kind of limits that we are facing because of different forms of oppression. You know, sometimes these forms of oppression are seemingly radical. They can, you know, knock at our doors in that way. Not like the poor note that wanted to find a place in the Raga. You know, you, she, he, they, I, as subject, object, agency, conjugate it as you will. This conjugation business has also now become very fudged, or on the contrary, not fudged. It has become overly determined. There is infinite reversibility between the ashik and the mashuk. You know, every time so coming back to nearer home, the whole Indo-Iranian Persian tradition, at least, I don't know, further west in Arabia, if it is so also, but this reversibility is there, that the lover and the beloved can be the same. They need not be divided in any sense. Like at a very short meeting that I had, but a splendid meeting that I had with M.S. Subbulakshmi, the great M.S. Subbulakshmi singer, etc. The one great insight she gave me was that between the bhakta and the icon also there is that relationship of creating one another. You know, so this is absolutely wonderful. We have it, and we can keep on doing this. That the creation and knowledge can go together, and it is more and more possible, actually, at an individual level. But it's not being given to the individual; instead, it's being sort of taken away from the individual. So it is a particular flaw, a particular fault, like Shakespeare had said. It's a flaw in the emerald and the ruby that renews in every unrepeatable, transient moment the breath of affirmation. Otherwise, an emerald is not worth having, or the ruby worth having. Both in it is a flaw which makes it, and also when it is worn here or anywhere, it's the moment when I'm turning this side or here, for instance, it will take light in a totally unpredictable way because of that flaw. So as cinematographers and as people working with the new media of imaging, we continue to look for that random thing. My sound recordist Namita is there, and she told me that she fooled around a lot with the tran sequences in my last film, Charajai, by sometimes slowing down something which he had taken at random of the sound of the tran, sometimes condensing it and probably valuing higher or a lower frequency range. And we have all this in even the earlier technologies that were used. For instance, in the no theatre, there are drums below the, which they say have below the stage, which are small drums, which actually change the modulation, but which do not appear to do so, and we do not have instruments to record what that change is. And so the possibilities of randomness given to the actor who's projecting his voice and his gesture are much greater. And this is a randomness that you can arrive at only if you start with an approach of rigor, of tremendous rigor, which you have to keep demanding of yourself right till the end, and to achieve a kind of simplicity and more than Sanchi is not far from here. I feel the same way whenever I go there. And there's the blueness of the sky each time, which also changes in Sanchi. It's an amazing sight even today after so many years of pollution. And every little curve of a tree or of the leaf within the tree, of the breast, which is supposed to be symmetrically poised in that, it actually changes with the changing light and the blueness of the sky, or the lack of blueness, the darkness of the sky. A little like the grapes, every year also they grow in a different way and provide you with, so you have wines of this year and that year. So depending on the light in September in the northern hemisphere and possibly in March in the southern hemisphere. The variance in the above is infinite. And so the scanning of reality, which is now available to us, which was not available to us before, the digital technology gives to us the opportunity of scanning. Earlier it was being bent through a lens, etc., on single images. Now the scanning of reality can move towards greater precision, but at the same time, if it is allowed too much to drain what we scan of its noise, then that reality will be nil. It will lose its music, because you've got to embed music in the noise. Without that, music doesn't exist. And by music, I don't really mean music, I mean obviously imaging. And the thing with cinematography was that we sought to be open to the variance, always, and to create through the noise a different kind of music. So much that was considered and thrown out of our, surrounding environment as meaningless was therefore given new meaning and new evocation, a new past and a new present and a new future, because of that. Whereas what is happening at the moment in the transmission of those very wonderful possibilities in the transmission, whether it is through a projector or on television, unfortunately, we are living in a kind of thoroughly fascistic presence, the present tense, all the time. Just saying there's panic, 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 panic all the time. That is the way our bodies and minds are being shaped now. And I hope that a certain kind of new restorative social being will emerge who will correct, and of course that social being will most probably be either an artist, an actor, an installation maker, filmmaker, something like that. Thank you.
Friends, what you heard is a brilliant presentation of randomness, done so randomly and yet very coherently in many ways. So we are very grateful, Kumar, for this wonderful lecture. Now, if there is some time, there are any comments or there are any questions to be asked. The lecture was too dense, so to provoke immediate reaction perhaps, but if there is something that somebody would like to ask, you're welcome. So be it. Thank you very much, all of you, for having come. We are of course very grateful to Kumar Shahni. This is a brilliant inauguration of Kaul Memorial Lecture Series. We hope that this level of density and depth and range would continue to animate this series even in future. On behalf of the Raza Foundation and the India Habitat Center, who are our collaborators, we are very grateful for you to have come, and we are of course very grateful to Kumar Shahni for having delivered this lecture. The next memorial lecture, that is the Kumar Gandhar Memorial Lecture, will be delivered on 10th of January by Dr. Mukund Lat. I don't yet know the theme. As you know, these are lectures designed for you to meet a major mind, and the theme is accidental. But anyway, so you are most welcome. Again at 6:30, and then at 7 the lecture starts. Thank you very much.